In church basements across America in the 1970s, a revolution was simmering. Not in politics or protest, but in dozens of mismatched crock-pots, each one labeled with masking tape and filled with dishes that would define a generation's comfort food memories. When rival manufacturing released the crock-pot in 1971, selling $93 million worth by 1975, they could not have predicted how this simple appliance would transform church fellowship halls into the beating hearts of communities nationwide. As women entered the workforce in unprecedented numbers, they needed convenient cooking solutions. Meanwhile, church potlucks remained the social cornerstones of American life. Picture those basement fellowship halls, fluorescent lights humming overhead, folding tables covered in vinyl tablecloths, and row after row of crock-pots, each one containing not just food, but expressions of care, community bonds, and traditions that would endure for generations. Let's rediscover 20 forgotten church cookbook crock-pot classics that fed souls as much as stomachs. Dishes that tell the story of how communities came together one slow cooked meal at a time. Swedish meatballs in grape jelly sauce. This unlikely marriage of frozen meatballs, grape jelly, and chili sauce became the stuff of church potluck legend. Nobody knows exactly who first combined these ingredients, but by the mid-1970s, this sweet and tangy creation appeared at virtually every church gathering, from Baptist congregations in Alabama to Lutheran churches in Minnesota. The magic happened during those long hours of slow cooking. The grape jelly would melt and mingle with the chili sauce, creating a glossy glaze that transformed budget frozen meatballs into something special. That distinctive aroma could fill an entire fellowship hall, drawing people downstairs before the closing hymn even ended. Church ladies would guard their recipes jealously, though everyone knew the basic formula. Some added Worcestershire for depth, others switched to cranberry sauce during the holidays, and a few rebels might slip in a splash of bourbon when the pastor was not looking. But regardless of variation, this was always the first empty crock-pot at any gathering. The phenomenon sparked friendly rivalries that lasted decades. Mrs. Henderson might casually mention that her secret was using Heinz chili sauce specifically, while Mrs. Patterson would counter that Welch's grape jelly was the only acceptable choice. Children would hover near this particular crock-pot, armed with toothpicks, conducting stealth missions to snag extra meatballs when their mothers weren't watching. Despite the morbid nickname, this cheesy potato casserole brought more comfort to grieving families than any sympathy card ever could. The dish earned its somber name because it became the go-to meal for post-funeral luncheons, though it appeared at happier occasions too. The recipe was brilliantly simple: frozen hash browns swimming in cream of chicken soup and sour cream, mixed with sharp cheddar cheese, then topped with a golden layer of crushed cornflakes mixed with melted butter. A single crock-pot could feed 20 grieving souls, stretching modest church budgets while providing substantial comfort food. Ladies' auxiliary members had the recipe so thoroughly memorized they could assemble it with their eyes closed, their hands moving with practiced efficiency whenever tragedy struck the congregation. In different regions, the dish took on different names. Midwesterners called them party potatoes, attempting to shed the funeral association. Southern congregations knew them as church lady potatoes, honoring the devoted women who prepared them. Mormon communities in Utah, where the dish possibly originated, simply called them those potatoes, and everyone knew exactly what they meant. That crunchy cornflake topping became the most coveted portion at every potluck. Adults would politely scoop from the middle, but children would brazenly dig for those crispy edges where the butter had created an almost candy-like crust. Some variations used French-fried onions instead of cornflakes, causing minor scandals among traditionalists who viewed such changes as near heresy. Little Smokies in barbecue sauce. These cocktail sausages, swimming in a mixture of bottled barbecue sauce and brown sugar, defined church social hours throughout the 70s. The dish epitomized economy and efficiency. For $3 you could feed 30 people, making this the ultimate budget appetizer for cash-strapped congregations saving up for new hymnals or roof repairs. The preparation could not have been simpler. Dump frozen cocktail wieners into a crock-pot, pour BBQ sauce over them, add a cup of brown sugar, stir, and let time work its magic. After hours of warming, the sauce would caramelize around the edges of the pot, creating crispy, candied bits that people would scrape off with determination. Children would hover nearby like tiny vultures, armed with those characteristic colored toothpicks, waiting for their chance at these caramelized morsels. Little Smokies. The social dynamics around the Little Smokies pot were fascinating to observe. Adults would take one or two, claiming they were watching their weight, then circle back repeatedly. Teenagers would dare each other to eat them by the dozen. Those tiny plastic cocktail forks in harvest gold or avocado green became weapons in the hands of determined youngsters competing for the last sausage. Chicken. This dish represented sophistication and special occasions in church culture. Reserved for pastor appreciation dinners, wedding receptions, and Christmas banquets. Chicken a la king made everyone feel they were dining at a fancy restaurant rather than in a church basement. The dish consisted of diced chicken swimming in a rich cream sauce, studded with bright red pimentos and green peas, sometimes with mushrooms if the budget allowed. The preparation required more skill than many crock-pot dishes. The sauce needed careful attention to prevent curdling, and the vegetables had to be added at just the right moment to maintain their color and texture. Served over church ladies' fluffy buttermilk biscuits, or sometimes over rice for variety, one chicken could miraculously feed a small congregation when properly stretched. Enough sauce. That distinctive pale cream color, punctuated with pimento dots, became instantly recognizable across Protestant America. The presentation mattered enormously. This was not slopped onto plates like everyday fare. Instead, it was ladled carefully, ensuring each serving had the proper distribution of chicken, vegetables, and sauce. Some churches invested in actual ladles specifically for chicken a la king service, considering plastic spoons insufficiently elegant for such a distinguished dish. Beef stroganoff. This dish introduced international cuisine to small-town churches, where exotic meant anything beyond meat and potatoes. The name alone sounded impossibly sophisticated, conjuring images of Russian nobility and European elegance. The church version bore little resemblance to its aristocratic origins. Ground beef replaced tender strips of beef. Cream of mushroom soup stood in for sour cream. And if you were lucky, someone might add a can of mushroom pieces. Served over wide egg noodles that had absorbed all the flavors during transport, this budget stroganoff nonetheless delivered comfort and satisfaction. Every church's spiral-bound cookbook featured at least 3 versions, each family claiming their secret ingredient made theirs superior. Murphy swore by a tablespoon of Worcestershire sauce, while Mrs. Klein insisted paprika was essential. Some added a splash of cooking sherry, though they would never admit it publicly. Having the best stroganoff recipe elevated your potluck status considerably. Women would cluster around particularly popular versions, trying to decode the mystery ingredient through careful tasting and pointed questions. The politics of stroganoff could divide women's circles more effectively than any doctrinal dispute. Ham and bean soup. Like clockwork, this soup appeared the week after Easter, when every church kitchen had leftover ham bones from the holiday feast. The tradition was so established that congregation members would actually look forward to post-Easter Wednesday night suppers, knowing this hearty soup would be waiting. The night before cooking, church kitchens would have multiple bowls of navy beans soaking, the dried legumes slowly expanding with promise. The next morning, volunteer cooks would arrive early, combining ham bones with their precious remaining meat, soaked beans, diced onions, carrots, and celery in massive crock-pots. The alchemy was simple but profound. Over 8 hours of slow cooking, the ham bone would release its smoky essence, and the beans would break down, thickening the soup. Down just enough to thicken the broth, and the vegetables would meld into sweet softness. Served with cornbread made in cast-iron skillets, butter melting into golden squares, this humble soup could feed multitudes on a shoestring budget. During building campaigns and fundraising drives, ham and bean soup became the unofficial meal of financial sacrifice, allowing churches to direct more money toward their goals while still providing hearty fellowship meals. Recipe exchanges happened over steaming bowls, with women comparing their grandmother's techniques for achieving the perfect consistency. Chili Mac, the youth group fundraiser champion, this dish combined two kid-friendly favorites into one profitable meal that could fund mission trips and summer camps. Ground beef, elbow macaroni, tomato sauce, kidney beans, and processed cheese created a filling meal that cost pennies per serving but could be sold for dollars at fundraising dinners. The genius of Chili Mac lay in its adaptability. Make it mild for the Lutheran grandmothers, add hot sauce for the Baptist youth group, throw in corn for the Methodists who liked their chili sweet. The first toppings bar many churches ever saw accompanied this dish: shredded cheese, oyster crackers, and simple condiments for guests to customize their bowls. Diced onions and hot sauce were set in separate bowls, allowing customization that felt revolutionary. Portion control was strictly enforced. One ladle per person on the first pass, seconds only after everyone was served. This taught patience alongside fellowship, though teenage boys would hover near the pot, calculating the exact moment they could claim additional servings. Lock-ins and overnight youth events were fueled by gallons of this mixture, the combination of carbohydrates and protein keeping teenagers energized through 12-hour marathon sessions of Bible study, volleyball, and testimony sharing. Chicken and dumplings. This dish carried the weight of history in every bite, transporting Depression-era wisdom through generations of church cooks. Every Southern church had at least 3 women who claimed their grandmother made the best version, and competitions could become surprisingly heated during homecoming celebrations. The ritual began with a whole chicken, simmered until the meat fell from the bones. The resulting broth became liquid gold, carefully seasoned and thickened just enough to coat a spoon. Then came the dumplings, dropped by spoonfuls into the bubbling liquid where they would puff into clouds of comfort. Southern churches insisted on rolled dumplings, thin and noodle-like, rolled into long ribbons, while Midwestern congregations preferred drop dumplings, thick and biscuit-like. These regional differences caused good-natured arguments at interchurch events. Children would watch the crock-pot lid with fascination, waiting for those dumplings to expand like magic. The transformation from raw dough to fluffy dumpling seemed miraculous to young eyes, a culinary miracle happening right in the church basement. This dish appeared wherever hardship struck: families dealing with loss, members facing unemployment, or households welcoming new babies. It was understood that chicken and dumplings could cure both physical hunger and emotional emptiness. Sloppy Joe mix. The church picnic staple that traveled well and fed crowds economically, this sweet and tangy mixture defined outdoor fellowship meals. The recipe evolved through the decades, from scratch versions with fresh vegetables to convenient adaptations using manwich sauce, though purists maintained that nothing compared to homemade. The meat mixture would simmer all morning, filling the church with an aroma that made focusing on sermons challenging. By lunchtime, the consistency would be perfect, thick enough to stay on a bun, but loose enough to require multiple napkins. Church ladies became experts at maintaining separate crock-pots, one for the meat mixture, another for keeping the buns warm. Filled with foil-wrapped hamburger buns, staying warm and soft. The serving line operated with military precision. One person ladled meat, another distributed buns, a third handed out napkins. Lots of napkins. Wednesday night dinners before Bible study featured this regularly, the casual messiness of the meal encouraging informal fellowship. Youth groups particularly loved sloppy joes, the inevitable spills and stains becoming badges of honor, proof of enthusiastic participation in church life. Cream of chicken hot dish. If there was a dish that defined Midwestern Protestant culture, this was it. Layers of chicken, mixed frozen vegetables, and cream of chicken soup, topped with tater tots or crushed crackers. This casserole appeared at every potluck from Lutheran churches in Minnesota to Methodist congregations in Iowa. The beauty lay in its reliability. The dish stayed warm for hours in a crock-pot, traveled well to sick visits, and could be assembled by anyone who could open cans and operate a can opener. Cream of chicken soup appeared in 80% of all church cookbook recipes, binding communities as surely as it bound casseroles. Every church had 5 ladies who made it their way. Mrs. Olson added water chestnuts for crunch. Mrs. Lindbergh insisted on using cream of mushroom instead. Mrs. Anderson topped hers with crushed potato chips, causing minor scandals among tater-tot traditionalists. New mothers could expect at least 3 versions delivered during their first week home. Grieving families might receive 5. The dish became shorthand for Christian care, a tangible expression of community support that could be reheated and served whenever energy for cooking ran low. Sunday's longest cooking dish, this started before sunrise and was ready just as evening fellowship began. The ritual began Saturday night when designated cooks would season massive pork shoulders with secret dry rub combinations, each claiming theirs produced superior bark. Sunday morning, before even the earliest service, these dedicated souls would arrive to start the crock-pots, the meat beginning its slow transformation from tough to tender. 1 pork shoulder, a bottle of BBQ sauce, sliced onions, and time could create 30 sandwiches. But the sauce sparked theological-level debates. Eastern North Carolina congregations insisted on vinegar-based sauce, declaring tomato-based versions an abomination. Western North Carolina churches favored tomato with a vinegar tang. South Carolina Baptists might add mustard, causing consternation among purists. Texas Methodist churches scoffed at sauce entirely, claiming proper meat needed no embellishment. Men would gather around the crock-pots like ancient tribal councils, discussing optimal cooking temperatures, debating whether to remove fat caps, arguing about when to add sauce. These discussions could last hours, becoming as much a part of fellowship as the meal itself. Vegetable beef soup. The monthly Clean Out the Freezer special demonstrated community cooperation at its finest. Different families contributed different vegetables. The Johnsons brought corn from their summer freezing sessions. The Petersons contributed green beans from their garden, and the Williamses added potatoes from their root cellar. Combined with ground beef and V8 juice, these individual contributions became something greater than their parts. This soup anchored the meal ministry, traveling in mason jars to shut-ins, hospital rooms, and households dealing with crisis, always accompanied by a sleeve of saltine crackers and real butter if the budget allowed, margarine if it did not. After hours of slow cooking, vegetables softened to perfect tenderness, creating a soup that tasted like pure comfort. No 2 batches were exactly the same. Were identical depending on what families contributed that month, but this variability became part of its charm. Children learned generosity watching their parents contribute vegetables, understanding that sharing resources strengthened the entire community. Spinach artichoke dip. This represented the height of sophistication in the 1970s church cuisine. Canned artichoke hearts were exotic, almost foreign to many congregations, where vegetables meant corn, beans, and potatoes. The dish was reserved exclusively for special occasions, bridal showers, women's ministry teas, and pastor's wife appreciation luncheons. The preparation required careful attention. Cream cheese needed proper softening, spinach required thorough draining, and artichokes demanded precise chopping. Served with wheat thins arranged in perfect fans on doily-lined plates, this dip signaled that an event was truly special. The pot was always scraped completely clean within minutes, with recipe requests following immediately. What started as an exclusive dish for special occasions gradually democratized, appearing at regular potlucks by the decade's end, though it never lost its association with refinement. Women who mastered this recipe gained considerable social capital, their versions becoming legendary within church circles. Meatball soup. This dish represented the beautiful integration of Italian-American culture. This fed into Protestant potluck traditions. As congregations became more diverse, food became the bridge between communities. Frozen meatballs, transformed with the right seasonings, swam alongside carrot coins and celery crescents in rich tomato broth. The soup required alphabet pasta or tiny stars, shapes that fit perfectly on spoons and delighted children. This requirement was non-negotiable. Regular spaghetti would not do. The tiny shapes were essential to the soup's identity, turning a simple meal into something playful and approachable. Miraculously, children who normally rejected vegetables would eagerly consume them when hidden in this soup. Parents watched in amazement as their picky eaters requested seconds, not realizing they were consuming entire servings of vegetables. The soup became a gateway dish, introducing hesitant Midwestern palates to Italian seasonings like oregano and basil, expanding culinary horizons one bowl at a time. Cheesy broccoli rice. This dish performed the miracle of making children actually request vegetables. The transformation was achieved through a simple formula: minute rice, frozen broccoli, Velveeta cheese, and cream of mushroom soup combined to create something greater than its processed parts. The key was proportion. Too much broccoli and children rebelled. Too little and mothers felt guilty. The perfect ratio had been scientifically determined through years of potluck trial and error. 1 part broccoli to 2 parts everything else. Church ladies would add French fried onions just before serving, that crunchy topping elevating the dish from simple side to requested favorite. This casserole turned crock-pot dish legitimized processed cheese in church cooking. Velveeta achieved ingredient sainthood for its melting properties and mild flavor that did not overwhelm young palates. Taco soup. This exotic dish felt like a culinary adventure for small-town churches where Mexican food meant hard-shell tacos from a box. The recipe revolutionized church cooking through its use of seasoning packets. Ranch dressing mix and taco seasoning became flavor foundations, eliminating the need for complex spice combinations. Every ingredient except ground beef came from a can: corn, black beans, pinto beans, tomatoes, green chilies. This dump and stir simplicity made it perfect for volunteer cooks with varying skill levels. The real innovation was the topping station. For many churches, this represented their first interactive food experience. Shredded cheese, sour cream, crushed tortilla chips, and sliced jalapenos in separate bowls allowed customization that felt revolutionary. Youth groups especially embraced this choose-your-own-adventure approach to eating. The soup's popularity helped normalize Southwestern flavors in traditional congregations, paving the way for greater culinary diversity in church potlucks. Apple butter. The all-day autumn tradition that turned church kitchens into sweet-smelling sanctuaries. The process began weeks earlier when families with apple trees would donate their surplus. Boxes of mixed varieties creating complex flavor profiles no single apple could achieve. The cooking became an event itself. Starting Friday evening, volunteers would peel and core apples, sharing gossip and testimony in equal measure. Saturday morning, the slow cooking began. Massive crock pots filled with apple chunks, cinnamon, cloves, and just enough sugar. The 12-hour cooking time meant volunteers worked in shifts, stirring, tasting, and adjusting seasoning. Church kitchens filled with such intoxicating cinnamon perfume that people would find excuses to walk through, inhaling deeply. Saturday evening brought the canning party. Women arrived with boxes of mason jars, the assembly line forming naturally, filling, wiping rims, applying lids, processing. These jars would be sold at church fundraisers, the profits supporting everything from youth mission trips to new choir robes. Spread on biscuits at every fall church breakfast, that specific apple cinnamon aroma announced autumn's arrival more reliably than any calendar. Chicken corn soup. This Pennsylvania Dutch contribution spread through Lutheran and Mennonite churches before conquering other denominations. The unique element was rivels, tiny egg dumplings that provided textural interest and stretched the soup to feed more people. The soup represented harvest celebration, made when corn was at its sweetest and chickens were plentiful. Each family guarded their rivel recipe carefully. Some made them tiny as rice grains, others large as peas. The technique for adding them, avoiding clumps while achieving even distribution, required practiced skill. Fresh corn kernels in summer gave way to frozen in winter, but the soup remained a constant, appearing at barn raisings, harvest homes, and fundraising dinners. Regional variations developed as the recipe traveled. Maryland churches added hard-boiled eggs, Ohio congregations included noodles instead of rivels, and Indiana churches might add saffron, a rare extravagance that turned the soup golden. Churches competed at county fairs, blue ribbons becoming sources of congregational pride displayed prominently in fellowship halls. Chocolate lava cake. This dessert proved crock-pots weren't limited to savory dishes, revolutionizing church dessert tables previously dominated by sheet cakes and pies. The miracle occurred during cooking. A simple batter separated into cake on top and hot fudge sauce below, as if guided by divine intervention. The discovery of this recipe caused a sensation in church circles. Women who had resigned themselves to bringing store-bought cookies to potlucks suddenly could produce a dessert that seemed professionally made. The drama of serving added to its appeal. That first spoonful breaking through the cake layer to reveal molten chocolate below created moments of genuine delight. Reserved for special occasions like pastor anniversaries and birthday celebrations, the cake required vanilla ice cream from those round cardboard containers, the cold cream melting into the hot chocolate, creating the perfect contrast. Children would wait with barely contained excitement for their servings, the anticipation almost as sweet as the dessert itself. This innovation showed church cooks embracing new possibilities, proving tradition and innovation could coexist deliciously. These 20 dishes represent more than recipes. They are edible archaeology of American community life, preserving the story of how ordinary people created extraordinary bonds over simple food. The crock-pot democratized cooking, allowing anyone, regardless of culinary skill, to contribute meaningfully to communal meals. These dishes fed the hungry, comforted the grieving, celebrated the joyous, and welcomed the stranger. In our current age of isolation, these recipes remind us of a time when church basements were community living rooms, when sharing food meant sharing life itself, and when a simple crock-pot could transform ingredients into sacraments of fellowship. Many churches still serve these exact dishes today, the recipes unchanged, passing down not just ingredients and techniques, but values of generosity, community, and care. Millennials now recreate their grandmother's recipes, finding in these humble dishes a connection to something larger than themselves, keeping the tradition alive one slow-cooked meal at a time. The next time you smell something wonderful simmering in a crock-pot, remember you are experiencing more than food. You are witnessing the continuation of a tradition that built communities, sustained families, and proved that the most profound connections often happen around the simplest meals.